In South Korea, there's a performance that millions engage in every single day. It's called Aegyo. And if you've spent any time watching K-pop, Korean dramas, or social media from Seoul, you've seen it. The exaggerated cuteness. The childlike voices. The finger hearts and playful pouts. But here's what's strange. These aren't children. They're adults. Successful professionals, celebrities, students in their 20s and 30s, all performing this ritualized cuteness. And the question nobody seems to ask is, why? Because Aegyo wasn't always part of Korean culture. 60 years ago, it barely existed. So what happened? What transformed an entire society to embrace this particular form of expression? The answer is far more disturbing than you might imagine. Seoul, 2025. One of the most technologically advanced cities on Earth. A place where tradition and hypermodernity collide. And everywhere you look, there's Aegyo. On variety shows, it's a required skill. Celebrities are regularly asked to do Aegyo on command. Some are famous for it. Others are mocked mercilessly if they refuse or do it poorly. It's not optional. It's expected. In the workplace, young employees, particularly women, deploy Aegyo strategically. A tilted head here. A softened voice there. It's a social lubricant, a survival mechanism. But why does Korean society demand this performance? The standard explanation goes like this: Aegyo is just part of Korean charm culture. It's cute. It's harmless. It's uniquely Korean. But scholars who study the phenomenon have found something else entirely. Something that connects Aegyo to Korea's darkest period. To understand Aegyo, we need to go back. Back to 1910, when Korea lost its independence. For 35 years, Korea was under brutal Japanese colonial rule. The Japanese didn't just occupy Korea, they tried to erase it. Korean language was suppressed in schools. Korean names were forcibly changed to Japanese names. Korean history was rewritten. Even practicing Korean culture could get you imprisoned or worse. But here's what historians discovered buried in colonial archives. The Japanese didn't just want to dominate Korea politically. They wanted to reshape Korean behavior itself. And they had a specific strategy for doing it. In colonial education documents, Japanese administrators repeatedly emphasized teaching Korean children, especially girls, something called kawaii culture. The culture of cuteness. Childlike behavior. Submissiveness disguised as charm. The goal was insidious. If you could make a population perform childishness, you could keep them politically infantile. Easier to control. Less likely to rebel. But there's something even more disturbing that most people don't know. Aegyo didn't just survive Japan's colonial period. It was reinforced by what came after. August 1945. Korea is finally free. But the celebration lasted barely 5 years before the peninsula was torn apart by civil war. The Korean War killed millions. When the guns finally fell silent in 1953, South Korea was one of the poorest nations on Earth. And here's where the story takes its darkest turn. In the decades after the war, South Korea became dependent on American military and economic support. The country was desperate to survive, desperate to modernize. And desperation creates vulnerability. Around American military bases, entire economies developed around servicing foreign soldiers. Thousands of Korean women worked in what were called camp towns. They were called comfort women by the Korean government itself, the same term used for women sexually enslaved by Japan during colonization. But here's what makes this especially disturbing. The South Korean government officially regulated this system. They registered these women. They gave them health checks. They even trained them in how to behave. And what behavior did they teach? Act cute. Be childlike. Don't be threatening. Smile constantly. Use soft voices. Make yourself small. In other words, perform Aegyo. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, South Korea pursued aggressive industrialization under military dictator Park Chung-hee. The so-called miracle on the Han River transformed the nation from poverty to prosperity in a single generation. But this miracle was built on the labor of young women. Hundreds of thousands of them working in textile factories and electronics assembly plants. Long hours, low pay, harsh conditions. The ideal workforce was considered to be unmarried women in their teens and 20s. Companies developed specific behavioral expectations for these female workers. Anthropologist Hae-Yun Chu spent years studying this period. She found something disturbing in the corporate archives. Companies explicitly trained young women workers to use Aegyo-like behavior. The logic was economic. Cute, compliant workers didn't unionize. They didn't demand raises aggressively. They didn't challenge male management. Aegyo became a tool of labor control. And it was incredibly effective. When women workers did organize, like the famous YH Trading Company strike in 1979, the government crushed them violently. But most workers never reached that point. They'd been trained since childhood that their value lay in being non-threatening, in performing cuteness and compliance. By the 1990s, South Korea had democratized. The economy was booming. And the government needed a new strategy for global influence. They called it the Korean Wave, Hallyu. The systematic export of Korean pop culture. K-pop, Korean dramas, variety shows, they all went global. And embedded in all of it was Aegyo. But now it was repackaged. Not as colonial residue or labor control, but as authentic Korean charm. Unique cultural expression. Something to celebrate. K-pop idols train for years before debut. And part of that training is learning Aegyo. How to tilt your head just right. How to soften your voice. How to make hearts with your fingers. It's literally codified in entertainment company training manuals. Through social media, Korean Aegyo went viral globally. Millions learned to make finger hearts. To pout for selfies. To adopt high-pitched voices. All without knowing the historical weight behind these gestures. But in Korea itself, something more troubling was happening. Because while the world celebrated Aegyo as cute and quirky, in South Korea, it was becoming something else entirely. A social requirement. An expectation. And increasingly, a trap. Present-day South Korea has one of the highest cosmetic surgery rates in the world. The highest rate of workplace discrimination against women. The lowest birth rate globally. And one of the highest rates of depression among young people. Are these facts connected to Aegyo culture? Dr. Kim Ji-young, a sociologist at Seoul National University, has studied this extensively. Her research reveals something disturbing. Women who refuse to perform Aegyo in South Korea face measurable social and economic penalties. In job interviews, women who don't display adequate Aegyo are rated as less hireable, even for positions requiring authority and leadership. On dating apps, women who don't use Aegyo poses get significantly fewer matches. In social situations, women who act too serious are labeled as cold or masculine. One anonymous survey of Korean women in their 20s found that 83% reported feeling pressure to perform Aegyo regularly. 67% said they hated doing it. But 79% said refusing felt professionally or socially dangerous. Aegyo has become a mask that Korean society demands women wear. A performance of non-threatening femininity that allows them to navigate a still deeply patriarchal culture. But the psychological cost is enormous. In recent years, resistance has emerged. The Escape the Corset movement saw thousands of Korean women publicly destroying makeup, cutting their hair short, and explicitly rejecting Aegyo culture. They called it what it was, a tool of oppression. These women documented their experiences online. The freedom of not performing cuteness. But also the backlash. Women lost jobs. Received death threats. Were ostracized by family. The reaction revealed just how deeply enforced Aegyo expectations really are. Conservative Korean society pushed back hard. They claimed these women were betraying Korean culture, becoming too Western, too feminist, too masculine. But the protesters had a response. They argued Aegyo wasn't authentic Korean culture at all. It was colonial trauma, frozen in time. And when you trace the history, from Japanese colonization, through the camptown system, through industrial labor control, through media commercialization, they have a point. Aegyo isn't ancient Korean tradition. It's barely 70 years old in its current form. It's manufactured culture. Trauma culture. Control culture. But here's what makes this story even more unsettling. Through the global success of K-pop and Korean media, Aegyo is now spreading worldwide. Millions of young people across Asia, Latin America, North America, and Europe are adopting these behaviors. They see it as fun, as cute, as culturally appreciative. They don't know they're reenacting behavior patterns designed for control. They don't know the trauma embedded in these gestures. They just know their favorite idols do it, so they do too. On TikTok, videos tagged with Aegyo-related content have been viewed over 15 billion times. On Instagram, Aegyo poses dominate Korean beauty content. A behavior pattern born from colonization and control is now a global aesthetic trend. And perhaps that's the most disturbing thing of all. How easily mechanisms of control can be repackaged as culture. How trauma responses can become trends. How an entire generation can adopt behaviors without ever asking where they came from or what they mean. So we return to where we began. The Aegyo culture in South Korea. But now you understand what you're really looking at. Not simple cuteness. Not harmless charm. But layer upon layer of historical trauma, expressed through performance. You're seeing the residue of colonial control. The survival strategies of wartime desperation. The labor discipline of rapid industrialization. The commercial exploitation of the Hallyu industry. All compressed into a single tilted head and a finger heart. And the women performing it? They're navigating impossible contradictions. Trying to succeed in a modern economy while meeting traditional expectations. Trying to be taken seriously while being required to act cute. Trying to be authentic while wearing a mask that society demands. Some are refusing. Creating new models of Korean femininity that don't require childlike performance. But the path is difficult. The backlash is real. And the question remains, can a culture shed its trauma patterns when those patterns have become commercially successful? South Korea has transformed itself from one of the poorest nations on earth to a global cultural superpower in just 70 years. It's a remarkable achievement. But transformation and healing aren't the same thing. Until Koreans, and the global culture consuming Korean media, can honestly confront where Aegyo came from and what it represents, it will remain what it's always been. Not culture, but camouflage. Not charm, but survival strategy. Not chosen, but required. The most effective forms of control are the ones we mistake for culture. The shocking reason behind Aegyo culture isn't that it exists. It's that we forgot to ask why. Don't forget to click the subscribe button for more deep dives into the past and interesting storylines.